All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here with all of you for this great conversation with tremendous leaders from two of America's closest allies, and probably one of the most impactful voices on innovation in the U.S. government, down there at the very end. This is an important conversation, and I'll note our panel's topic, the importance of allies and partnerships, has come up during many of the panels today. Before we start, I just want to give a quick thank you to the Reagan Institute and Roger and Rachel for inviting me to moderate. So I'll do some really brief introductions. The man right next to me to my right, Ambassador Kevin Rudd, Australia's 26th Prime Minister. He's been the Ambassador of the United States since 2023, Foreign Affairs Minister for a period of time there as well, and he's one of the world's foremost experts on China. General Sir Gwyn Jenkins, the Commandant of the Royal Marine Corps and a Strategic Advisor to the Secretary of State for Defense, with a C. He was previously the Vice Chief of the Defense Staff. He's an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran. But the role I'd want to hear most about was your time as aide-de-camp for the Queen. So. No one thought that was funny?
No, we're serious.
I'm serious about this. There's pictures of Ronald Reagan with the Queen in here. And then finally, at the end, Doug Beck, the Director of the Pentagon's Defense Innovation Unit, which I know a lot of people in this room have worked with over the years. He reported directly to Tim Cook at Apple for 13 years. He now reports directly to the Secretary of Defense. Doug is also a Navy Reserve captain and is an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran as well. So, gentlemen, welcome. Let's talk about the report card really quick and the grades. I'll note that International Allies and Partnerships got a C, which is neutral compared to last year's report. So clearly, I guess there's some work to do there. I'll note that for Innovation Leadership, it got an A-. So I guess, Doug, that one's for you. Broad open-ended question. We'll start with Ambassador Rudd and give you the opportunity perhaps to highlight some of the innovative partnerships between the United States and your country, and I know AUKUS obviously is, I'm sure, a big one.
Well, good to be here with our friends from the Reagan Institute and with colleagues from the UK and the United States. I never understand the American obsession with the royal family, by the way, but Queen was a lovely lady. We had dinner with her many times. Charles is a good bloke, and that's kind of the end of it. So.
Should we move the topic on?
Yeah. She was a fine monarch, as is he. On the question of the subject at hand, which is where do we go to on the critical domain of defence innovation, the value added for Australia and I hope the United Kingdom for the period ahead is what we now unleash through what we call AUKUS Pillar 2. Who in this room is not familiar with AUKUS Pillar 2? Who is familiar with AUKUS Pillar 2? Thank you. The religion has been conveyed. But the importance of raising it in a gathering such as this, and with an audience such as this, is that we have now done the policy, legislation, and reg. It's done, okay? And for those of you who come from DOD or state, or our interlocutors up on Capitol Hill, we all bear the common scar tissue of having brought it into being. But the legislation's through, the NDAA is through, our status under the DSA is through. We now have a revised and reformed excluded technology list. There's been a deep change to FMS, a deep change to ITARs, and we are now into an increasingly seamless, if we choose to make it that way, defence science technology industry sector across our three countries. Now, anyone who's familiar with this landscape, for those of you in the defence space, will know how hard a nut this has been to crack for a very long period of time. It is not perfect, but it's about 80% right in terms of where we need to be. And that is a significant advance on where we were. So my message to this audience, and many of you work within the sector, is simply that our job now is to turn the legislative change and the regulatory change, which has now been achieved as of the end of October last year, into cultural reality across our three systems, and then into project reality across our three sets of firms. And the sooner that we have concrete, we can point at it and open and shut it, or it can go bang and pop, as evidence of being able to get an idea into the hands of the warfighter in 2 years rather than 12, the better our three democracies and three defence establishments will be, and our warfighters will be for the future. So the tasking we have in the Australian system, I can't speak on behalf of the Brits, even though we have the same head of state. It's the King, by the way. You guys had a revolution, but you're still obsessed with the monarchy. But as I said, we'll think about that later on. Is how do we, as we get through calendar year 2025, point to what is most forward-leaning and possible in multiple categories, both in, let's call it, the dual-use technologies of artificial intelligence and quantum and the rest. Obviously, unmanned systems, which are both dual-use as well, but subsea, on land and in the air. And then guided weapons and explosive ordnance through to the rest of what is now possible through this seamless environment between us. So the Australian government, speaking on behalf of the institution through the Department of Defence in Canberra, is now geared up for this. 150 plus staff from Defence here in the embassy in Washington is geared up for this. And our capital markets, you may be interested to hear, are also becoming geared up for this. And we can go on to that a little further in the conversation if you'd like.
Great. General.
Yeah, so I don't think you have to look much further than Pillar 2 and Pillar 1 on AUKUS to talk about innovation between the nations and the opportunity that is presented to us here. I'd absolutely agree with the Ambassador that it's the legislative change that is the big game changer for us here. As Vice Chief in Defence, working with the Vice Chairman here and our counterpart in Australia, overseeing Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 cooperation, the biggest challenge that faces us, and is true across our bureaucracies on the innovation challenge, is the bureaucracy itself, and it's how you navigate at pace the various checks, balances, obstructions that are in place that stop us doing the collaboration that we all instinctively feel we should be able to do. I think the other challenge with Pillar 2 in particular has been this honing in on specific projects that can deliver value to the warfighter in the shortest possible time. There has been a temptation with Pillar 2, I feel, to be too speculative in the long-term goals that might be achieved. It risked becoming too much of a science project and not enough of an application project. Feels to me now that is being wrestled back. Feels to me the legislative changes will really be able to deliver that. But don't underestimate, and we can't really talk about it in this audience, but don't underestimate the Pillar 1 piece and how fundamental that is at driving the closer collaboration. You know, from way back in the day, right back in the 1950s, you know, it has been the fundamental foundation on which the UK-US defence partnership, intelligence sharing activities have been based. It's a phenomenal level of collaboration, cooperation, transparency that happens between our two nations. Bringing Australia into that mix in the Pillar 1 piece really has unlocked this Pillar 2 conversation. And I don't think they're divisible. You can't have one without the other, in truth. And I think at its heart, that is what makes this truly unique and different for us as allies. We have, none of us, this relationship with anyone else on this basis. And that's what gives me quite a lot of excitement and anticipation for what is to come on the Pillar 2 side in particular.
Doug, could I ask you what type of role allies and partners play at DIU? I think when a lot of us think of DIU, we think of, you know, out in Silicon Valley working with tech startups, but there's a much broader mission you have as well.
Absolutely. So first, I just want to say thanks to Roger and Rachel and the Ronald Reagan Institute for having me here today, and thank you also to everybody who is here today. And actually, if you think about the focus that the Reagan Institute has on the National Security Innovation Base, much less it's such a core part of that, of the Institute's focus. that's both a reflection and also a contributor to just how far we've come. And we still have a very, very, very long way to go, as the grades in there represent. So I'm proud to be on that team, and also really honored to be up here with my UK and Australian partners. So the answer is that allies and partners represent a really core part of the strategy for DIU. And that's because allies and partners are a core part of who we are. And it's also because it's a core part of how best to meet the strategic imperative that faces us as a nation. We have friends, and our friends are incredibly capable, and that's one of our greatest strengths. And we together have a shared imperative to defend the free and open international system upon which we all depend, as well as sharing incredible technology across our three ecosystems. So it's really a pretty core part. Actually, we've got 5 major lines of effort under our DIU 3.0 strategy, and Partners with Allies and Partners is one of those core ones. And it really starts with the partnership that's represented up here in AUKUS. So I mean, I'd love to talk maybe a little bit more broadly about some of the things that we're doing with allies and partners, but is it worth me drilling in for just a second to build on what was just said about AUKUS?
Go ahead. That was gonna be
Yeah,
my
'cause,
natural follow-up to
this
you.
It's been a huge focus for us. So for us, our partnership, international partnerships, is really about working with our closest allies and partners who have innovation entities of various kinds to partner deeply with them, and to help those who don't to build them, and then to really convert that in those partnerships into real impact now. And if you think about the role that we play in AUKUS, first of all, just stepping back with my broader hat on, I could not agree more with what Ambassador Rudd said about the criticality of some of the key legislative changes that have happened and the ability to move seamlessly. That may sound like a small thing, but it's a dramatic thing. And I agree very much that Pillar 1 is critical. And, the first UK submarines are somewhere in the 2030s, and the first Australian submarines are likely somewhere in the 2040s. Pillar 2 is meant, because it's tech, to be a lot sooner, but there is the challenge of potentially, as the general referred to, that devolving a bit into longer term projects to really get after kind of the true frontier of technology together, which we must do. Our part of the puzzle, though, is a little bit different. Our part is about leveraging very powerful commercially available or commercially derived technology in AI, autonomy, quantum, cyber, space, biotech, getting after that quickly, and then putting points on the board right now that can help the warfighter the next year or two in each of our countries, and also through interoperability, all of us together, and then also help us to build the muscle that makes it easier for us to do that again and again and again, and frankly also contributes momentum, because it's points on the board for the broader Pillar 2 efforts and then Pillar 1 as well. So really, our part of the puzzle is about points on the board. So we've exchanged. I and my counterparts, we talk constantly. In fact, we've got a call tomorrow. We exchange embeds, and we did last year an electronic warfare challenge, which I'd say was a first step toward true interoperability of those challenges. The next one, which we'll be announcing soon, there's a teaser, is in the broadly, I don't think I'm getting ahead of myself, say broadly in the maritime autonomy space, and also really builds on what we learned from last year's in getting to the next level of true interoperability in terms of decision making and acceleration into then procurement and execution to get things into the hands of the warfighter. So that's a huge focus of what we're doing, on top of all the critical work that we do bilaterally with the UK and with Australia in critical areas. And these things tend to overlap as well. So for example, I'll just have one more quick example, and then I'll stop. You can tell I'm super passionate about this, though. But one example, is we do quite a lot with the Australians in space for a bunch of very good reasons, go all the way back to the origins of our space program. So we at DIU work very closely on everything from responsive space to hypersonics. And that's helped to build our HICAT program, which is a hypersonic testing program that helps you go from normal, traditional hypersonic testing, which sounds like an oxymoron, but kind of isn't, might be $250 million to $500 million to do to get to the first test. That can take 7 to 10 years. We've worked with a bunch of commercially dual use type of companies to get that down already to about 25 million and a couple of years, on the way to about 5 million or less and sooner. That allows us to do many, many more tests for a lot less to get the cycle time of acceleration much faster. That testing capability is now the testing capability for hypersonics from our side for the AUKUS work, for example, around hypersonics. And that's how we kind of all work together as a department to try to leverage some of the stuff that we're doing together.
So I want to put a bow on AUKUS real quick, though. I'll ask the ambassador and the general. Ambassador, you talked about the changes that are made to ITAR and other changes. General, you talked about navigating the bureaucracy being a challenge. Kind of as you look at both, I guess, the submarines and the Pillar 2. I guess what gives you pause? What are your bigger concerns to actually moving this project along?
Is that a glass half full or a glass half empty? Our brains seem to be trained into identifying problems rather than to roll with opportunities. So this glass is almost half full because I've been drinking quite a lot. Frankly, that's where we got to. Let's make it work. It can be made to work. I agree totally with what Doug just said. This should be project-driven from this point on, and projects which have near-term potentiality for realisation. And the reason I say that is, having been a creature of public policy myself for most of my life, in one form or the other, what I know works in bureaucracies, and I imagine the Brits and the Americans are not hugely different from our own, is if you drive a project through a bureaucracy, that is the best means by which to identify what the actual real-world impediments are within the bureaucracy, as opposed to this permanent tinkering with the bureaucratic system in order to establish whether it could be further perfected, as it were, from the top down, as opposed to the project up. That, I think, is the way forward here. Second thing, and I back up what the General just had to say about the interrelationship with AUKUS Pillar 1. Why do I say that? Pillar 1 has a bucket load of cash already attached to it. We crazy Australians are about to spend $250 billion US on this thing. Therefore, what's going to come out of that is just not a bunch of black objects, though it will, and they are designed for a particular purpose. Both the ones we buy here and the ones we build with the Brits and with American technological input in the AUKUS class SSNs. The spin-off from all the above in terms of the rest of the defence innovation ecosystem is going to be huge. So therefore, the synergies which will begin to emerge between that on the one hand and the liberated space which is now available under AUKUS Pillar 2 through FMS, ITARs and the rest reform will actually, if we have enough entrepreneurs in the midst of this, by which I mean bureaucratic entrepreneurs as well as classic entrepreneurs in the midst of it, we can be cooking with gas very quickly and getting stuff done. Final point I'd make is in terms of the corporate buy-in. For me, the encouraging thing is that these final list of ITARs, FMS and ETL reforms were only put out on the books as of the end of October last year. November, December, January, February, that's 4 months ago. So far we have 245 Australian defence firms registered under the new scheme. We already have close to 100 US firms registered under the defence scheme. I don't have the British numbers. So entrepreneurs and the defence sector are actually rising to the challenge, marrying them where necessary with VC and other capital loads into this can make it work. But what we should be doing as three governments is identifying our 3 to 5 project possibilities, industry challenges within project possibilities, and race this thing through to the end and see who comes first in the race by the end of this year, by the end of next year. And then what I know again about sort of politics and business is success breeds success. And as soon as we've got a critical mass of successes, guess what? Everyone's going to want to get on this bus. So I keep going back to the glass. It's about as full as we're going to get it right now. And the virtue is it's enough to run with.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think this idea, it's quite difficult for us, I think, as humans, and particularly as organisations, to imagine a fundamentally different future. And I'm aware of the room that I'm talking to here, so there's plenty of good futurologists here, I'm sure. But what we've got now with AUKUS 1 and 2 is really only the foothills. We are unlocking resource, expertise, supply chain growth. Just look, so 2 weeks ago I was in Barrow, Inverness in the UK, which is where we build our submarines, looking at the scale of investment that's going into that site. And it's not just this sort of capital investment that's going into the new facilities that will support both AUKUS and the UK submarine programme. Actually, the bit that impressed me most is the educational academy that's on the side of it that is being constructed in order to bring in the new and young talent that are interested in these areas. It's the investment now in these intelligent, entrepreneurial, incredible young people that are getting re-engaged with defence in a way that I don't think they have been for a couple of decades now. That will provide us with significant reward further down the line, and that's just focused on that one site, on that one sort of big capital area. It's happening across the supply chain for AUKUS, I think, and Pillar 2 will cause the same thing, I'm sure. If you ask me what are the real challenges, I could probably boil them down to just two. The first one is it's our ability to prioritise. Can we focus enough on the things that matter in order to attract the kind of resource and attention to them that they need to come to fruition? And that's true in both pillars. And if we can prioritise, can we make the decisions in the time that they're needed in order to bear fruit as well? And I think there's too often within all our organisations there is a temptation to procrastinate, to always seek more information, to not make the decision until you've got the 100% of the facts, and then there is a real temptation to not prioritise.
Did we inherit that from you?
I think we share some common ancestry in this regard, definitely. And just this ability to it's not just a political thing; it's an official thing as well, which is provide the focus that the organisations need to focus resource to get effect, and then take the decisions in the time frame you need rather than unnecessarily delaying them. Neither of those things are easy to do by any stretch, but if we can at least improve them, then we will make significant progress much more quickly.
So switching gears a little bit, there's been a huge influx of venture funds into defense. Just look at this event, to look at the folks who are here over the last decade or so. Despite this money, despite tons of innovation coming out of small businesses, it's been hard still for companies to penetrate the government bureaucracy. I don't have the exact figure, but I'm thinking of a report that just shows the breakdown of how much the five primes in the United States tend to get of the U.S. budget, and how much everybody else gets. But I do believe that startup percentage went up slightly in recent years. Doug, can you talk about how DIU has evolved and will continue to evolve to make sure warfighters do get the best technology that's out there?
Sure. So first of all, probably a lot of the people in this room could actually say what I'm about to say for me. So if anybody wants to. But at the end of the day, I mean, back in 2014-15, Secretary Ash Carter was prescient in seeing that there's no way that we could meet the strategic imperative facing us as a nation at that point, much less where the future is going to lead, unless we were able to take full advantage of the commercially derived tech sector in areas like AI and autonomy, et cetera. that I mentioned before, and that we had to do something different in order to get there. The organization I now lead was born out of that. At the time, it was DIU-X, and I like to think of that as kind of DIU 1.0. The first step was really about building a bridge at all between these two worlds because we couldn't even talk to each other. The second step was about proving that you could actually solve real military problems with commercially derived tech, use authorities we already had on the books but didn't know how to use, and deliver concrete prototypes to the warfighter. I see some former teammates who are part of that right here, and do it within weeks or months as opposed to 5 or 10 years. At the time, that was revolutionary. We've done it over 500 times now at DIU. We've spawned these other organizations around the department to help do it, and that is all fantastic, but it's not good enough because what we have to do now is take that capability and actually use it to deliver strategic effect. And that means, first of all, focusing it on those critical operational capability gaps, which, by the way, we share, in order to be able to deter major conflict or when it's forced to fight. And then second, it's about doing the hard work with the rest of the department as well as allies and partners to scale that so that the capability delivers strategic impact, because a prototype doesn't. By the way, we need that scale for strategic impact, and the tech sector needs it for the ROI to work, because otherwise it's a whole lot of investment that leads to nowhere. That's not going to work either. So DIU 3.0 has been all about doing that. That's why my organization was elevated to be a direct report to the secretary. It's why I messed up my very comfortable life, you mentioned at Apple, to come do this. And it's what we've been after for the last couple of years. We made a bunch of progress. We have a long, long way to go. The big parts of what we do in order to do that: one, we embed deeply with the warfighter. So Indo-PACOM's commercial tech lead is an embed from my team. I was with Admiral Paparo yesterday, visiting a bunch of companies together to get stuff done. The second thing we do is we work with the rest of the department to scale things. It's mostly about partnership with the services as well as with our partners across the Office of Secretary of Defense and the Joint Staff to go get stuff scaled. Third, we help catalyze that community of all the innovators around the department to be a cohesive community, go get after this. Fourth, we try to take our partnership with the tech sector to the next level through the portfolios as well as through our on-ramp hubs and other means of getting into the department, really to help break down the systemic barriers that are there and then help folks to scale. And that's what Liz McNally, who's our Deputy Director for Commercial Operations, leads that whole piece. And then fifth, it's about allies and partners, as we talked about. That's what we've been focused on. We've made a lot of progress, have a long way to go. Congress has helped. First, with establishing us in statute for the first time at the end of 2023, as well as locking kind of our status as a direct report to the Secretary and giving us the authority to help do all the things I just said. And then quickly afterwards, with an appropriation that brought what we've got to work with to about $1 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's also probably the most talked about 0.1% of the defense budget that we've got. That was a joke. But not a joke. Reality, though, it really is all about partnering with everybody to kind of scale the impact of that so it goes much further. What's much more important, though, I think, than that number is actually the flexibility in the budget, because we now have the ability to go all the way from initial idea all the way to fielding initial fielding to operational units, which puts us in a position to work much more closely with the services in a completely different way so that we can help build the prototype and fund the initial fielding in that first year, work with the service on the second year while they're hopefully working on the longer term funding through our unfortunately very complicated process to scale things by the third. If we get that right, we cross the valley. So that's basically what we've been up to. Where we're headed now is all about scaling that capability and how we take that to the next level. And the Trump administration and Secretary Hegseth are very focused on how do we take this capability and really take it to the next level. So the opportunity now is really enormous for us to build on the momentum that we've started here and really deliver the strategic impact that we need in the time frame that we need it. Because there's been a little bit of talk about the adversary here, and particularly with a focus on, as China, as the senator talked about at lunch, we do not have time to mess around.
Yeah. Ambassador, well, sticking on the subject of defense investment, I understand you held a big summit last week about dual-use tech investment. Talk about what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, just to back in Doug on the China point first, we don't have time to screw around. We just don't. We stopped having time to screw around several years ago. We're still partly screwing around. I'm a lifelong student of the Chinese Communist Party system. They're not screwing around. They are moving forth as a juggernaut, and juggernauts are by definition inefficient. But let me tell you, they still move forward. So therefore, we will permanently seminar on the further perfect perfections of our systems in our countries and between our countries while the juggernaut grinds on. So I underscore what Doug just said before about urgency. Part of the equation in terms of making defence innovation work is breaking down the regulatory and legislative structures so that we can work seamlessly. Part of it is, as the General said before, priorities, and stop screwing around with priorities. I always think of Rickover. If he didn't have some priorities, I doubt if we would have had the first, SSN in the system. He knew about priorities. He may not have had a sense of humour, but he knew about priorities. So it's clearing away the legislative and regulatory impediments, mobilising, frankly, defence industry by introducing them to the new, relatively seamless environment now operating between the three of us, establishing priorities in terms of projects which define success, and within, not in the science park, but in the real ballpark of what can be landed in the hands of the warfighter. Let's set a mental date within 24 months, 18 months of when a project begins, and make that an industry challenge. But then you get down to capital. Yes, there's been a spawning of venture capital in this country, less as far as the defence, science, technology and industry sector is concerned, less so in the United Kingdom, less so in Australia. What I convened in the embassy last week is I brought all of our what we call super funds to Washington DC. Superannuation is what Australians call, what you call pensions. Unlike other countries, for 35 or 40 years now, we've mandated savings. Every Australian has to now save 12% of their income for retirement. We've been doing that in stages since the 1990s, early 1990s. Bottom line, 27 million people, we now have $2.7 trillion US dollars under management. It's the fourth largest source of investment capital in the world now. Put that in context, it's bigger than the Saudi and Emirati sovereign funds combined. Now, these pension funds, which I deliberately brought to Washington to meet the administration, and we met Secretary of the Treasury, met Director of the National Economic Council, met the Secretary of Commerce, and others in the official establishment, in their overall investment frameworks are looking at balanced portfolios because you're dealing with the long-term needs of the retirees in Australia. And part of that is an appetite increasingly on the part of each of them for venture capital, but beyond venture capital as well. And for them, the dual-use technologies which are now unleashed under AUKUS Pillar 2 are open for business. So our point in bringing them here to town and to engage with Doug and his team and with others from the defence innovation space across the US system, which is what we did, was to introduce all of our CEOs and chairmen and chairwomen of our pension funds to the fact that this will now be a rapidly growing market. The proof of the pudding will lie in the eating, but we're off to a good start. And the fact that this occurred 3 or 4 months after we'd completed the regulatory reform process through AUKUS Pillar 2, I think augurs well. Particularly when those guys and girls see the fact that we can do projects across the combined, as it were, capital base of our 3 defence budgets, and frankly increasing our integrated planning when it comes to future conventional warfare platforms.
General, can you talk a little bit about how the UK is working with startups? And I understand part of the whole defence buildup that's going on in the UK right now is actually being geared toward smaller businesses.
Yeah, just to sort of build on Doug's point. So first of all, I'm a massive fan of the DRU and what you guys have done, and we're learning a lot together on this journey. We all 3 of us, face a familiar challenge, which is how do you bridge the valley we can innovate at the edge. We've got loads of innovation going on, and we're not short of imaginative people or companies that are trying to solve problems that we don't even know we've got. But trying to bridge that and scale within our organisations is a real challenge. At least part of that is because, to be honest, we're all bunged up with our programs. There's not enough flexibility in the programming. Most of the resource is allocated. Trying to break that resource out at pace in order to focus on new initiatives is quite difficult in its current construct. That, at least in part, is why our government is reforming defence at the moment. It's quite a busy time in London right now for a bunch of reasons. There's been quite a lot of talk about rising defence spending in the UK, at least in our press. That actually isn't the big issue at play here for me. Well, the big issue is the ambition our government has to reform defence as a whole. So we're in the midst of a defence review right now, and we're also in the midst, just about to launch a reorganisation of defence of a scale that we haven't really seen since at least the end of the Cold War. At its heart, the reason I mention that is because at its heart, that is all about trying to unblock the system. I'm conscious of the ambassador's wise words about don't tinker with the bureaucracy. This isn't tinkering with it. This is a fundamental change to the way we work, and it's directly trying to learn our lessons from what we've been doing in support to Ukraine on how we take capability at pace and apply it into the hardest environments, as some of our previous speakers have said, the hardest electronic warfare environments in the world, and trying to apply the latest technology there to give our Ukrainian partners an edge. Is trying to take the lessons that we have learned from that, which is all about portfolios. It's all about giving access for small and medium sized enterprises. It's all about running competitions at some fair scale in order to find successful solutions to some really tough problems, and then rapidly progressing those prototypes into fielded examples. Where a lot of us scratch our heads is, well, yeah, we can definitely do that in Ukraine. We are doing that in Ukraine with the Ukrainians right now. Why can't we apply that to our own system? Why, when we come back to London, does it suddenly become so difficult? There's some really good organisational reasons for why that's true. None of them are satisfactory, but there are some good explanations for why that's true. The defence reform we're going through is effectively an attempt to apply those lessons into our military today, so that we can streamline the access for small and medium scale enterprises in particular. The enthusiasm that we've generated over a number of these projects and a number of these competitions, and then start applying that to the core rather than just to the edge, or just to the just to the sort of specific case of Ukraine. We have challenges in terms of the access that the primes enjoy, the preferential treatment that the primes get with our organisation. There's not enough competition amongst the primes, in my opinion. They do some great service for us, but if we look back to the 1990s, where we had tens of primes operating in our defence systems, and we fast forward to now, and we've got single-digit primes operating, I think we all instinctively feel there needs to be more competition there. But some of it is just about unlocking our regulatory process so that the small and medium-scale enterprises don't need to employ an army full of lawyers just to navigate the form filling in order to get the access into the programs, when they've got solutions that we know will work for some of our specific applications, even if we then absolutely will still need the primes to do some of the big scaling that we'll need to roll this stuff out across the board.
So, Doug, I was going to ask you about some work you're doing in the Indo-Pacific, specifically to talk about China, but I'll give you that if you want it, and I'll also give you the final thoughts since we have about 1 minute and 45 seconds left. Okay,
I'll very, very quickly answer that question. Then, if I can, I might make two sort of sappy comments at the end. Since you're going to give me the chance to do that. So first, in terms of, obviously in a way, the kind of deepest and most advanced partnership that we've got is represented by the three of us up here in AUKUS with our innovation partners. We're also working very, very closely with the Indians. So we've got joint challenges there where the first one was in undersea communications, and then we did one in maritime surveillance, maritime domain awareness, and then we are now working on one in space. We've got a partnership with the Singaporeans, working together on counter UAS and some other areas with the Japanese, where we help them stand up their own kind of DIU-like entity, which has DIU person embedded inside, as well as we're now doing our first 2 challenges with them. Really, we're working kind of across the region with our allies and partners, seeing a lot of what we've learned with our partners here, and really delivering that impact. And that's about the fact that we have shared operational strategic imperatives, we have shared great tech, we look for the place those intersections are, we deliver real capability together, which also helps to build the broader relationships, and it also creates a deterrent. I mean, the Chinese hate when we all work together on this stuff, and that's good. Leads me to the last point that I would make. Ambassador Rudd mentioned, the revolution we had, a few hundred years ago, and I would just kind of reinforce the importance of these partnerships, that we must all hang together, or we shall all surely hang together. These partnerships are absolutely core. We share a absolutely indelible need to defend that free and open international system upon which we all depend, and we have very deep both historical. I've served in Iraq and Afghanistan with my partners from both these countries. We have a lot of very deep strength to build on. We also have this shared imperative to get after it together. Leads me to my other sappy comment, which is about risk. For us to get there, we're going to have to change the way that we think about risk. And I meant, you mentioned, my service downrange. I came home from that service recognizing that most of what I'd thought of my entire career in the private sector as risk was not risk, it was uncertainty. Risk is risk to mission, risk to force, strategic risk for our nation. And what we have to do is we've got to get much more in the business of taking the right kind of risks, process risk, financial risk, reputational risk, because we might look stupid by getting it wrong, in order to avoid translating that into real risk on the backs of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians, Marines, who'd have to fight the war if we have to go fight it. That's the kind of risk we've all got to take, and we have to all take it together.
Folks, we're out of time. I want to please join me in thanking our panelists.